right, I'm going to call the Board of Directors meeting to order for May 15th for East Bay Community Energy. You're all welcome, so I've now welcomed you. We'll now do the roll.
Albany. Here. Berkeley. Dublin.
Here.
Emeryville.
Here.
Fremont. Hayward.
Here.
Thank you. Livermore. Oakland. Piedmont. San Leandro. Union City. Community Advisory Committee.
Here.
Alameda County.
Here.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. San Leandro has arrived.
San Leandro's here. We're one away from a quorum. Okay, so Mr. Pilch, would you lead us in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry about that. That's all right, you're here. All right, public comment, a time in which you can speak to anything that is not on today's agenda. Hearing, jeez, we're healthy now. Sorry. Anybody wish to speak? Thank you. So as you heard, we are one shy of a quorum, so we cannot do the consent agenda item, but we will do the very exciting CEO report.
Okay, before I start on the CEO report, I did want to request that items 9 and 11
Item 9
be
what?
moved to the consent agenda.
Say that again?
I would like to request that items 9 and 11 be moved to the consent agenda.
Okay, we'll do that. When we do the consent, we'll do 9 and 11. That sounds great.
Okay,
Now, do you have a pithy report for us?
I do.
right.
Before we get into the marketing presentation, I do want to introduce our newest member of the EBCE team, Jesse. Do you want to just give a very quick introduction of yourself?
Okay, first thing we got to do is show you how to turn the mic on. Push the button. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Jessie Denver, the new Distributed Energy Resources Program Manager. I will be leading local solar and energy storage for resiliency programming, as well as the electric mobility strategy and programming. Prior to joining EBCE, I was the City of San Francisco's energy manager, working on all distributed energy resource policy and programs. And previously to that, I was with Vote Solar as a program director and served as the City of San Jose's energy manager for almost a decade. So I'm super happy to be here.
Welcome. Any questions? All right, well, thank you.
All right. Annie? Annie will be giving our marketing and outreach update.
Yeah. Yep.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Try and be pithy.
Please.
So we decided we are well into serving customer load after our initial November enrollment, and so we're moving slightly away from the previous standard of reporting. We can still provide jurisdictional opt-out numbers to those that would like it, but I think for this forum, we wanted to start to refocus more on sort of broadly how many accounts do we have enrolled and what kind of cost savings have we brought. I think we should probably also add here the greenhouse gas savings as a result of enrolling our customers with EBCE. So we're about 540,000 customers. That number will continue to grow slightly as we continue to enroll our solar customers across the county. To date, we're about $5 million in savings, which is very exciting. For 2019, we project, just for 2019 alone, about $7 million in savings. So then that would be additive to some of the 2018 savings that we're showing here. Our overall opt-out by count is hovering around 3.5%. It's a little bit lower by load because, as you can see, we have a higher opt-out rate from our residential customers compared to our commercial customers, and yet commercial customers tend to have a higher load. For our NEM Solar Enrollment, as I mentioned, we did our first phase of enrollment in April. Oh, they don't have it on theirs. Would you like me to continue, or should we wait? Okay. So we did our first enrollment of solar customers, those who had true updates between January and April. We did that in April, and now we'll continue every 2 months, so the next one will be June. So far, we've enrolled about 15,000 solar customers. We have another 13,000 or so to go. If you look only at those that are currently enrolled, we have about a 4.5% opt-out, but we have opened it up so that any solar customer that would like to opt out can, in fact, do that preemptively before their phase. And so if you look at the total number of eligible, we're about 2.5. Okay. So some of this I've already spoken to. I'll go to the second bullet, which also speaks to an item that Nick requested be moved to the consent agenda. PG&E revised their rates yet again, just slightly, effective May 1. We're still anticipating the final rate changes to come in July, but per the policy set by the board, staff did take steps to modify our rates so that we maintained the value propositions for our 3 different products. That actually went live Monday with an effective date of May 1, and the updated rate sheets are on our website now. And I just wanted to sort of speak to something that is upcoming. Last year, we launched for commercial customers in June, and we sent out something called a joint rate mailer on a delayed schedule. Typically, the joint rate mailer, which is something we work on with PG&E and is required by the PUC, we typically need to send that out by July 1 each year. Last year, we got an extension because we had just enrolled our first phase of customers. This year, we are again requesting an extension from the PUC, this time because it is anticipated that PG&E's final rates will not be approved until July 1, so we don't want to send something out to 500,000 customers with stale data. So more to come on that, but just know that it will be delayed. In marketing and outreach, I just wanted to highlight some of the recent activities. We issued a RFP for graphic design and web services. It's due this Friday. I did send that out to all of the small, local, and emerging businesses that were certified by the county and registered as graphic design as their category. So anyone who had provided an email, I sent it out to that group. I did also send it out to any vendor that other CCAs had indicated they worked with, as well as shared it with the board, the CAC. We posted it on social media and on the website. So we anticipate to have good feedback there. We are going to follow up on the initial market research that we did back in 2018. Now that we have been serving customers, we want to see, are they more aware of us? What are their thoughts? And so we'll be bringing that back to the board to share the results of that research. And I just wanted to note, perhaps JP will talk about this more, but the program's efforts are well underway and things are getting out the door very quickly. So the team that I work with continues to provide support around some of these early actions. For outreach, April was Earth Month, and we participated in events in all jurisdictions. It was very successful, very busy month. It's no longer Earth Day. It truly does last the whole month. Just recently, we participated in Bike to Work Day. We had an Energizer station at San Leandro at the Bayfair BART station. We also were with a couple other local businesses in Emeryville at a City of Emeryville-sponsored Energizer station. That was a lot of fun. And we continue to do our town hall meetings and various other community activities. We will be at the county fair coming up, which launches in June, and we are the sponsor of the power station. Otherwise, we continue to support programs, business as usual. I think many of you received emails today soliciting your feedback. We In this email, we identified sort of the key events that we see coming up over the next 6 months or so in your jurisdiction. We're asking, are these the ones you think we should be at? Are there others that we should be looking into? So appreciate your feedback on that. And that is it for marketing and outreach.
I had one additional update there on the sort of the services procurement front. We, about 3 weeks ago, issued an RFP for audit services, and the bids will be due at the end of this week. And we are looking forward to seeing what we get back, and expect to bring probably at the June board meeting a recommendation for the board around the selection of an auditor for at minimum 1 year, but we have the option for 3 years as part of the audit services that we'll be bringing forward.
On that, I just want to make sure I heard what I heard. So you're doing an RFP for that?
Yes.
Okay. And who's going to be on the committee that picks them?
So we have our finance subcommittee, so I would envision that would be something we would be.
Right, but I'm talking about, are you going to bring in a panel of experts?
We were not planning to bring in panel a group of board member experts. We were going to interview the candidates and make a recommendation to the board.
Committee?
No, the staff was going to review the candidates and bring a recommendation to the board for audit, and then the finance committee would be the committee that would actually engage with the auditor through the audit process.
I don't know if it's good that staff is picking the auditor.
Okay.
I think it would be best if we had a panel of like finance directors from the cities, a couple cities, and maybe the county, and maybe the staff member from our, that came together and went through them and did them. I don't think, not that I think anything funny is happening here, I just think the perception to the public, and quite frankly, any committee that I've been on in which this happens, that's the way it does happen. Staff is kind of out of it because of the sensitivity of it.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That's
I don't know if anybody else has any
good.
feelings on that. Okay.
Okay. Right. So I will be likely sending a note out to the board asking for recommendations for finance directors for us to reach out to put on this panel. So that will be something that will happen in the next. So we'll start with Alameda County.
I don't think you need to reach out to us. Why don't you just reach out to maybe a large city, a small city in the county?
Okay.
And so that would get you to maybe Oakland's auditor.
Yeah.
Courtney Ruby.
City auditor and finance directors, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Courtney Ruby's really good.
Okay.
I would suggest her, and then maybe somebody from a large city and a small city. And
okay.
Then everybody's going, then somebody from your staff, I think, would, I think that'd be a good group right there.
Okay. Great.
All right. Okay.
Will do.
So you said that you guys you guys moved the rates, right? Effective the end of May. Is that what you said?
Effective May 1.
May 1.
So
okay.
any bill cycle that begins on May 1 or after.
So we're still 1.5% below PG&E, correct?
Correct.
And MCE is what?
0.3%.
So we should tell our friends at Contra Costa County the mistake they made. The other thing too, hey, I say it like it is. The fact that we've saved the ratepayers in Alameda County $5 million, I think is huge. And did you tweet that? Because I normally read your tweets.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Did you tweet it?
Did we tweet it? We included a savings number when we did the press release around the repayment of the county of the $4.7 million. We haven't recently retweeted that number, but we can absolutely.
I think you should. I think it should be just about that.
Yeah.
We have saved Alameda County residents and their energy bills over $7 million. Is it $7 million?
It's $5 million to date.
$5 million to date. $9 million at the end of the year.
7 point something at the end of 2019.
I think you should. I think that is a big thing, and I think maybe people don't feel like 1.5% is that much.
Right.
But when they get the grand number, maybe they'll start opening their eyes, and these people that are helping out. The other thing that I did want to talk about real quick is when new customers come in, say they're either buying a home or they're moving from Pleasanton to Livermore, I guess this website comes up and says you have the option of using PG&E, or hey, in your new community of Livermore, they have this community energy company. Which one do you want? Which one do you want?
They don't. So they are automatically enrolled with EBCE by default. So if you were to move from Pleasanton to Livermore, and you moved into an existing home, you would call up PG&E to reestablish your electricity and natural gas account. They send us that information, we automatically enroll them in our service, and we send out 2 notifications in over 2 months, letting them know that they are our customer and we are providing them electricity service.
I'm going to trust you that that's right, but somebody told me something different today. They said they actually had the choice of PG&E or EBCE, and I said, well, of course you picked EBCE, correct? And they said yes. But
that is not the expected process. We'll investigate if that is a process out there. It's not supposed to happen.
I could be getting bad information too.
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff worries me. So.
Yeah, we get on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis. Forgive me, I forget the cadence. A list of new customers. And then with that list, we send out this direct mail notification as required by the PUC. And so I feel confident that we are, in fact, automatically enrolling customers, but we can certainly look into that and see if there's...
So a question, Annie. What is our success rate with these new customers now? Now that we're up and running, now that people are moving in, are we able to explain it well enough so they opt with us, or they stay with us?
That's an interesting question. I haven't looked at the data in such a way as to identify what we refer to as new connects and the opt-out within that population.
Yeah.
I will say that the number of opt-outs right now on a daily basis is like 20. So we've definitely seen, after initial spikes, which is to be expected given the amount of outreach and notification that we did, after initial spikes, we've really sort of stabilized in terms of the amount of opt-outs. And I would say probably the vast majority of those are from the solar customers that we're still actively bringing into the program. But that is, I will work with our data group and see if we can look at, specifically you're asking for new customers to our service and what is their opt-out rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Mendel?
So I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Chair. Just build on the suggestion for, whether it's a tweet or whatever. It's savings so far. We've saved our customers $5 million. There's some others there that, that we've built this much local clean power, invested this much in our local development business plan. We've how much greenhouse gas savings. It feels like there's a sort of a series of them that we can do on a quarterly basis to just sort of remind people why we're here.
Yeah, that's great. I think we'll have more and more to contribute to those metrics as we go as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Dr. Hernandez?
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to bike to work. Myself and Vice Mayor Lopez had a chance to stop by the Energizer station. It was well represented by our secretary and other, I think it was Danny and Daniel as well. So it was great to see them out there representing Bike to Work Day. So I really appreciate that and getting the word out. I think you might have got a few questions about the program, and I also would like to still sit on that audit committee if I could to review what's going on. I'm not sure which finance director might be involved in looking at it. In my previous roles, I've had a chance to look at audit reports, and companies like Mays and Associates and other ones stand out really well. But I just want to make sure I made that comment. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Are you done? Mr. Executive Director?
Yep.
Are you done, Nick?
Yeah.
No, Nick, are you done?
Yes, I am done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, we'll go to the community advisory report. And I'll note that before we start with that with the arrival of Mr. Kolb, that we now have a quorum.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mary Sutter. I am the interim vice chair of the CAC, and Olivia is not able to be here today, so I'm filling in her stead. We have two things that we wanted to share for you from the CAC. One is, I think it was last week, you may have all received a letter from the East Bay Clean Power Alliance regarding a possible process for bringing on new CAC members. We know that the executive committee for the EBCE will be perhaps working on a policy for that, and the CAC wanted to let you all know that we support that process as written, with two exceptions. We'd like one addition to a policy, and that is to have that policy include how to handle current CAC members who are being termed out. And the other component of that is, in the letter, it talks about having a CAC member as a member of the committee who's choosing new CAC members, and the committee does not agree with that particular component. They don't feel a CAC person should be on that selection process. The other thing I want to share with you is that the CAC heard about the legislative strategy that EBC is putting forward, and that there are several bills that are going to be watched or opposed or thought to support. And they were very interested in hearing about that strategy. They didn't hear much about it. We're asking that staff come back and talk to us more. And it's possible that at some point in the future you may hear from the CAC about any of that strategy or specific bills. But I have nothing more to report on that today. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the report. Yeah, I'm going to go back to consent. I was going to do that, Al. Thank you. So what I need now is a motion on the consent calendar. And the consent calendar will include 9 and 11, if somebody would like to make that motion.
So, go ahead.
Right, nine. No, I had some questions. Once the
well, let's get the consent calendar rolling.
So I'll move 4, 5. I'm sorry, I'll move 4, 5, 9, and 11.
All right, I have a motion on the consent calendar adding 9 and 11 by Mendel. Second by Martinez. Is there any objection to the motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Director Pilch.
Questions and comment. So curious why the last minute move of items 9 and 11 to consent, or the request for that?
There was, the intent was that these items were going to be put on the consent calendar, and I think there was perhaps just some miscommunication on my part with staff that ended having them end up not on the consent calendar. So that was my fault for not making it clear that that was my intention.
Okay, thank you. And just for the members of the public, if anyone wanted to comment on those two items, now would be the time for 9 and 11. And I have a question about 11, just an informational question. Why we got together with these particular CCAs on that agreement, and why not others? Were these just particularly agreeable CCAs, or how did that process work?
Yeah, so I think myself and the leaders of these CCAs have been, we regularly meet, given sort of all of our proximities from the East Bay to the South Bay and up the peninsula. So we share a lot of similarities, and so we regularly meet to coordinate and collaborate. And we had been talking for some time about the value of putting in place this agreement, and so that was really the rationale. I think there's also some benefit of when you're trying to negotiate an agreement like this, not trying to bring in too many counterparties. Otherwise, with every lawyer you add, it becomes that much more challenging to actually finish things up. So we do hope that other CCAs may join us, but now they have to agree to our terms, not come and renegotiate the contract.
Yeah, certainly the collective power seems like the right way to go, so thank you for that. I'm done with my questions. Thanks.
Okay, so...
One other point, Chair.
Oh, go ahead, Director
Thank you very
Hernandez.
much, Chair. Question on San Jose and understanding how they work. I noticed there was a nuance there in the contract that if they don't get their budget renewed, they were able to opt out of the agreement. It would be like a June 30th or so. Is that how I understand it? And if their setup of their organization is a little different, because it appears to be a department, not an organization like EBC. Is that correct?
That's right. So San Jose Clean Energy is a department of the city of San Jose. They are an enterprise fund, so they do have, in a way, a similar structure to Joint Powers Authority in that, there's no recourse to the city, but they're really a part of the city, and in that way, it's different. Inder, you may have additional insights.
Thank you. Inder Khalsa, General Counsel. The member agencies of the EBCE, your city's general funds are protected from any EBCE issues because you've formed a joint powers authority. Yes. Because the San Jose Clean Energy is part of the city, they have to build language into every one of their contracts to specifically protect the city of San Jose's general fund and to limit any liability to the enterprise fund associated with energy. So that they did request some very specific language that you saw in several places in this agreement to that effect. However, just like us, they are, we also have essentially an enterprise fund, and our liability is limited to that by the function of the Joint Powers Authority. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And the follow-up question in regards to their expiration of such a, maybe they don't get funded, and they end the relationship June 30th and at the end of their fiscal year, would they still be able to get a benefit from any kind of settlement or any other kind of action post their termination of the agreement? Say there is some kind of injunction or some kind of relief from a claim or what have you, and they're out of this agreement, how do they sort of work that arrangement out where they may not be able to get the benefit, they're no longer part of this agreement?
So the way the parties negotiated that issue, if there's any liability in excess of what the parties are agreeing to here, it would be shared by the parties subject to a separate agreement. So this really just creates a structure for us to enter into subsequent cost-sharing agreements. There's no obligation for any of these parties to actually participate in them, so we could have a cost-sharing agreement with only 2 of the parties or 3 of the parties, and San Jose may decide to opt out. But for the parties that opt in, they agree at that point in time that they will share any excess liability that's associated with that contract, and so that would reach back to San Jose even if they decided to opt out.
So this will be the vehicle to create the future agreements on cost sharing, and it depends who agrees to that agreement. It might be 20% of 5 agencies or less. I think that's what I saw in the language, just to further
Right,
clarify.
it might be split equally. They can also allocate it differently, maybe based on population or some other metric, but the general idea was that most of these agreements we would split equally amongst the CCAs, and that's what's being proposed for now. Okay. But this structure allows us to be flexible and to maybe develop different agreements under different circumstances to fit our needs.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Director Cobb?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On item 9, I guess my question or really comment is not directly related to item 9, but it kind of relates to it. When we set these rates, we said 1.5% below, our base rate is 1.5% below PG&E. We also said that the power mix would be 5% or at least 5% above the RPS requirement for PG&E, right? So that's fine. We're good right now and next year, but shortly thereafter, we're going to have to increase. 38% at some point won't be enough. And so I want to make sure that we are continually going to be looking at that in the next couple of years and beyond, and we will always be at least 5% above the renewables requirement, RPS requirement that PG&E must get to in any given year. Is that already planned to happen?
So that is, until such time as the board directs us otherwise, that is how our power mix works. So 85% with renewables growing at that 5% above the RPS, and so that requirement also is reflected, say, in PG&E's costs. So if we have higher renewables costs, ostensibly they should as well because their RPS requirement is rising. But yes, that's where we are for 2019, and that's where we will continue to be, again, unless we are directed otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? So for the members of the public, we're moving 4, 5, 9, and 11. Anybody wish to speak on those items? Seeing none, I will ask, is there any objection to the motion? Motion passes without objection. I'm going to go ahead because we did kind of start a bit odd today. We started a little bit late, but we didn't have a quorum. So Jessica Tovar wants to speak under public comment. So I'm going to go back to public comment and let her speak.
Just real quick, can you hear me?
Barely, you're not on.
It's not on. Okay, it has to be read. I think the first thing is just to reiterate getting those community advisory seats filled as soon as possible. We were lucky to have a quorum on Monday, but I think a lot of important issues are coming up, and it'd be good to have those seats filled. And then the other thing I wanted to just kind of pose a question. We did talk about at the Community Advisory Committee PG&E time of use program. And if I recall correctly, they talked about residential customers being phased in and I guess being guaranteed savings the first year. It's kind of like a pilot, and this wouldn't affect people who are on CARE, FARA, and those designated low-income programs. However, we were wondering if there's a way to measure how this could potentially affect ratepayers who don't necessarily qualify for those programs, but might still be considered low-income or struggling ratepayers. So it's just a question on the PG&E time of use issue, and I don't know if that can be answered now, but I wanted to ask that question. Thanks.
Okay, Jessica, thank you. Okay, so with that, I will move to item 8.
We do have a presentation on item 12. We were wondering whether we might be able to move that item forward.
Okay, Nick, I'll let you run the meeting. Item 12.
Good evening, everybody. Mark Wiedeman with the Wiedeman Group. For those of you I haven't met, I'm your lobbyist, and our firm is up in Sacramento, and we've been representing you for a little over a year. And today, I made a presentation to the executive committee a couple weeks ago, and they thought it would be a good idea for me to come to the full board meeting and make a quick presentation of what's going on in Sacramento, what types of things the legislature and the governor are dealing with, and how we, EBCE, are engaging in that process. So just to frame things up, we obviously have a new governor, and he's a very different governor than our last governor, and he has a very different leadership style. Jerry Brown sat back a little bit and let the legislature and interest groups go out there and try to solve some problems, and he didn't really jump in until things had really germinated to the point where they were ready, right, and they were ripe. Gavin Newsom is different. He is jumping into every single issue he can find that he cares about, whether it's ready for prime time or not. So we have a much more active governor, and it remains to be seen if this approach is a good one or not. There could be, some people think we have a sage governor in Jerry Brown who's been there once before and came back for his second 2 terms, and he realized you don't want to take hold of every issue because once you take hold of it, you own it. So you own a failure as much as you do a success. So let these issues rise to the top, and when they're ready, then jump in. Gavin Newsom is saying, no way, no how. I'm jumping in. I'm going to try to solve these things at the ground floor level. So really active, and you saw this out of the gates with issues like immigration, issues like healthcare, issues like death penalty reform. Obviously, he's taking a big stand on that at the national level. Going in and reforming the DMV. I mean, that's a pretty toxic issue for any politician to touch, the DMV. He literally said, if you can't solve the DMV, you don't deserve to be governor of this state. You should be recalled. Those are some bold words when you're talking about the DMV. So the reason I frame it like that is that energy was really not at the top of his agenda. And it was one of these things where he moved into the space more or less because he had to. And if I can figure out how to advance this slide. Is it down? There we go. So the campfire was a big deal. All right, we obviously had wildfires last year and in 2017. The legislature and Governor Brown thought they came in there and did some pretty good work with SB 901, which had the PUC doing some stress tests of the IOUs, having the IOUs put together these plans that were about safety and changing culture. And if the IOUs did everything they were supposed to do, there would be some ability to rate base any financial losses associated with wildfires. This plan, the legislature and the governor at the time thought was sufficient to get us through wildfires going forward. And then we had the Camp Fire, and that changed everything. And the devastation in Paradise. And today, CAL FIRE issued their findings, and they found that PG&E was liable for that fire. I think we all suspected that, just reading the reports about how things went down in Paradise and the neighboring areas. But it's official, according to CAL FIRE, that PG&E is responsible for that. And the markets, of course, have been expecting this as well. And we have a situation where PG&E was thought to have been liable by the markets. They anticipated that. They downgraded PG&E. Ultimately, PG&E goes into bankruptcy. And then we have another IOU, Edison, getting some downgradings by the rating agencies, also on the verge of bankruptcy. And this is something that has taken the Newsom administration over. They literally hit the pause button on almost everything else they were working on, brought in a team of experts, a bunch of folks from across the state, Guggenheim, O'Melveny, some others to come in and advise them on what they can do, on what we can do as a state to ensure the financial solvency of the investor-owned utilities. Because if you had a second IOU go down, Edison, we would have a huge part, obviously, of the entire energy infrastructure in the state of California in bankruptcy, which is not a good thing. So how do we save them from financial solvency? And also, what do we do as a state to better prepare ourselves to address wildfires going forward? So we've had a series of things happen in Sacramento. The governor has put together the strike force team, and they issued a wildfire report that came out in early April. That wildfire report has a number of recommendations in it. There are 5 key recommendations in there that set the stage for what is going to be some sort of legislative activity that we expect to happen over the next few months. Just at a high level, the 5 things in there are preventing, how to prevent and fight catastrophic wildfires. That's primarily around vegetation management, fire suppression efforts. What can we do to make sure that we don't have this kindling around all of our wires and lines that are leading to these fires? A second key recommendation in the governor's report is really renewing California's commitment to clean energy. What the governor is saying there is he's saying we are not going to abandon our RPS goals to get 100% renewables just because we had these wildfires. We are going to do everything we can to make sure we stay on track as a state to meet our renewables targets. The third recommendation is around fair allocation of wildfire charges and damages. So there are 3 different funds that the governor is looking at, 3 different ideas in this place, and this is really the focus primarily of what the legislature is looking at now that this report has come out. And this is around how do we take care of victims that have been damaged by these wildfires? And how do we create a fund going forward that protects the solvencies of the investor-owned utilities going forward when we have additional devastating wildfires that have, damages to the tunes of tens of billions of dollars. So there's been a lot of discussion around a wildfire fund. And we expect that the legislature will be actually pushing legislation that could create a wildfire fund by July 12th, which is what Newsom's deadline was for wanting to get legislation to his desk around a wildfire fund. 2 other issues that are in the governor's report are strengthening utility market regulation. There's some interesting tidbits in there about reforming the PUC, getting the PUC to have more experts in place, having a PUC that pushes some more work down to staff. Too much is at the commissioner level, according to the governor's report, and not enough is getting done quick enough and responsive enough to the industry and to ratepayers. So there's recommendations in there that are interesting around reform. And then the final thing is holding PG&E accountable. And this gets down to governance and a culture of safety at PG&E that the governor would like to see. So these 5 main recommendations are in this report, and they've been submitted to the legislature. The legislature is starting a process of looking into these recommendations. At the same time that is happening, there is a separate wildfire commission out there. that was assembled pursuant to legislation that was enacted last year, SB 901. That separate wildfire commission has appointees of the governor and the speaker and the Senate president. That commission is going deeper on a lot of the same issues that the governor examined in his strike force report, and they're going to be issuing their own recommendations. A draft recommendation is going to come out in June. They've already had 4 hearings. We expect one more hearing on the draft report that they come out with in mid-June, and then it's off to the races with the legislature really digging deep and doing hearings on the governor's report and the recommendations in the governor's report, the recommendations in this wildfire commission report, and trying to come up with legislation that they can get on the governor's desk by July 12th. Why is July 12th important? Does anybody know? Because the summer recess of the legislature starts on July 13th, and they're gone for a month on vacation. And the governor wants to get it on his desk before we have another devastating wildfire, right? Before the wildfire season truly kicks into high gear. Because the idea is to get some financial solvency for the IOUs, get the credit ratings up for the investor-owned utilities, get PG&E out of bankruptcy, prevent Edison from falling into bankruptcy, and really bring some stability to the market from that perspective so that their borrowing costs are lower, so that victims can be paid out reparations for the wildfire losses and things like that. So getting some stability around that is really the top priority of the governor right now and the legislature. Where do we fit into that? We are really ancillary to it all, right? And in a purposeful way. We are not the cause of this situation, but we are, as an entity, somebody that can step in and help. So let's say, for example, the legislature and the governor and their wisdom say that we need to change the focus of the IOUs. It needs to be more around a culture of safety, more around transmission, wires, poles, things like that, less around power and generation and procurement. That theoretically could happen. And they could ask entities like the CCAs to step in and play a more distinctive role in that space, be a provider of last resort in that space. Whatever it might be, there could be an opportunity for us, EBCE and the other CCAs, to step in and pick up some of the slack if ultimately the legislature and the governor decide that they want to refocus the IOUs around transmission, poles, wires, and a culture of safety. And that's a possibility. And what we've done is we've been making sure that we are holding meetings and making sure folks understand and appreciate that we're here to help and that we're ready to be involved in this process in whatever way they deem appropriate. Yeah, go ahead. We've got a couple more slides, but yeah, go right ahead.
I have a question.
Okay, hold on.
Go ahead.
Stephanie, we're not giving this.
Yeah, so you mentioned the 901 Commission. I just found their website. You said there's one more public hearing?
Well, I spoke with Commissioner Pedro Nava this morning, and he indicated that they're going to issue a draft report in the next couple weeks. They're aiming for early June, and they want to have one more hearing to let folks have an opportunity to comment on the draft report. So it hasn't, I don't think it's been noticed yet, but their intent is to probably do one more hearing.
Okay, as soon as you find the date of that hearing, could you let us?
Absolutely.
We'll make sure we know about it.
Absolutely, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
And there will be an opportunity at all these hearings. There's an opportunity, like we're doing here today, for public comment for anybody who wants to weigh in.
Okay, anybody else? Go ahead, Terry. I'm sorry.
At the executive committee, thank you, Chair. You mentioned, we talked a little bit about our potential role as part of the solution, and you sort of touched upon it briefly there. I wonder, as our representative in Sacramento, how do you think we're viewed by the legislature, the governor, at this point? Are we part of the solution, or are we that other sort of entity off to the side? CCAs in general, not just East Bay.
Yeah, they think we're the new kids on the block, and we haven't quite earned our stripes yet. They don't have any real negative, feelings about us, but they just think that we're too new to take on a whole lot more than we've got today. That's generally how they feel about us. However, I think that the CCAs and the CCA model is surprising people with its success. You know, with the reports we saw earlier tonight, right? The lower rates, the higher renewable uptick, and I think people are being educated very quickly about how CCAs can really transform the energy marketplace. And I do think that while they still see us as the new kids in the block and they're really not ready to give us the keys to the car, that's a lot of analogies, I know.
No,
but they're really just saying, you know what, we're intrigued by you. You seem to be doing good stuff, but you don't really have creditworthiness yet. We're not ready. We're not sure you're completely ready to take on a lot of these responsibilities, but we're intrigued by you, is really where they're at with us. And I think that if you were to ask them, what does the energy market look like 10 years from now? They would say it looks like a more decentralized market with more CCAs.
So
The executive director wants to say something along those lines, I think.
you just turned the mic.
Just wanted to share along those lines. Today there was a hearing where the new CEO of PG&E was being interviewed, deposed, I'm not sure. And there were multiple members of the assembly who brought up CCAs. Unfortunately, he did not have a lot of awareness. We're going to work on that. But it was clear, this is really the most clear I've ever heard from elected officials, that they see CCAs as part of the future. I think Al Marisucci, who's a member from Southern California, said, did you know, Mr. Johnson, that 80% of your customers are going to be served by CCAs in the next 5 years? And he actually brought up the idea that PG&E might want to exit the generation business. So that was, I believe, without prompting from any CCA. So I thought that was positive.
Yeah.
So if I could follow up on that,
absolutely.
and I appreciate your comments and Nick's as well. And I wanted the rest of the board to hear it, because I think that we have a role here as we're talking with our legislative representatives. When we have a success, let's make sure we tout that with them, because I think what I'm hearing is that they're sort of intrigued, they're hopeful that we'll start to deliver on some of the promises they imagine might be coming. And so when we do deliver, let's make sure they know about it, hear about it from us frequently and often and directly from our staff, and hopefully cement more quickly that view amongst them that we are part of the solution, because we clearly are, in my opinion, but we have a little proving to do.
Yeah, it's a great point. And we, as your legislative representatives and the EBCE team, Nick, Melissa, Deirdre, are meeting with our legislative representatives on a regular basis, probably a couple times a month. Mr. Cobb came up, a week or so ago and did meetings with, our representatives, and it is working. Right? A lot of them are already there on the natural with us, but they are understanding more and more about what we're doing here, and I feel like they're getting stronger buy-in. When you have situations where legislators represent a district that is represented by a CCA, they pretty much are all in on the CCA approach. Not all of them, but a lot of them are all in. So that means that most of the CCAs are doing a good job of convincing their local representatives of what they're doing, and they're headed down the right pathway. One area, which is a nice pivot to our next slide, where this whole idea of our CCAs ready, is around central procurement. So there are several bills in the legislature that are looking at creating a central procurement entity that would essentially go in and procure on behalf of potentially everybody in the California marketplace, including CCAs. Now, I think our perspective on that is part of the reason we are here is to procure for ourselves and procure locally and meet the needs of our community in the East Bay. So that's one of the areas where we have some concerns with some of these bills, and I think we're open to sort of a backstop procurement entity. So if you're not meeting your resource adequacy requirements, you might need some help in that regard, then maybe this centralized procurement entity could step in. More of a residual procurement entity is how we would describe it, but not an entity that would go in and procure power on behalf of EBCE. We think we're doing fine in that space. So that's a dialogue we're having with the legislature now. I think it's going to play out over the course of the next 3 or 4 months. I don't think this is something that will be part of the July 12 legislation that will go to the governor's desk, but it'll be part of a longer conversation. And then our last slide here just lists a bunch of the bills, and we throw this up here. We went through these bills with the executive committee just to give you all an idea of some of the stuff we're working on right now. So at a high level, we're working on these central procurement bills that are out there that I just mentioned. We're working on wildfire bills. There are a few bills out there that we expect will be amended to put in some language that is significantly responsive to the wildfire crisis that we're going to want to potentially engage in. There's a bill about supplier diversity, a Bradford bill bill that we support. There's some energy efficiency bills out there, like a Skinner bill that we support. This is just to give you an idea of the types of things we are engaging in. An oppose unless amended on a provider of last resort bill by Senator Hertzberg that would essentially create some more PUC regulation on CCAs that we don't feel is necessary. And so we're engaging in that process. So I think we have a broad engagement in Sacramento. Our association is very helpful, and we work very closely with our association and our colleagues at other CCAs. And we are slowly but surely making a name for ourselves. The legislature has been very used to hearing from the IOUs for a long time. They have frankly dominated the debate around energy in this state for decades. And it's time for some different, unique voices, I think, from the perspective of a lot of those legislators, and we're being welcomed to the podium in that regard in many ways. So I'll stop there and open it up for any additional questions.
Looking left? Looking right? Okay. Looks like you got off easy then. Doesn't appear to be any questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
I have one question.
Now, why did I know you were going to do that,
Just a request,
Come on
actually.
back.
No, that's okay. Just as soon as the first house finishes, and can you let us know what the results are of all these bills going into June? Because we may not individually check up on that. So.
Absolutely. We'll send you reports as things are happening. Just to give you an idea, the deadline for the first house of bills have to be out of their house of origin. So if it was introduced in the Assembly, it's got to be out of the Assembly. If it was introduced in the Senate, it's got to be out of the Senate, is the end of May. So we'll know whether these bills are moving to the second house pretty quickly, and we'll make sure to keep you all up to speed on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, as far as this whole discussion about CCAs being the new kid on the block, maybe something you might want to think about with our state organization is that each CCA does kind of a update as to where they're at, and then you put that in a book, and then you combine all the CCAs and talk about all the money that's been saved and all the great, environmental things we've done. So you have each one individually, then you have a total of what we've done, and then submit it to the legislature. I think that would be something that we might want to think about doing at our statewide. We might as well get that out of our statewide organization.
We've been collecting a lot of that information at the trade association, but I really like the idea of making it into sort of a nice book that you can actually leave behind.
Right.
Coffee table.
And if they don't want to do it, I guess we could do it, but it just seems it would be more impactful if we used all the CCAs in the state of California, and at some point put us individually in the book, and then at the end of the book pull us together to show, what, we're really not the new kids, we're the way of the future, and quit treating us that way, quit patting us on the head.
Or poking us in the eye.
It's either one, yeah.
Actually, along those lines, there has been some initial discussion that is happening amongst the 5 CCAs that entered into that joint agreement. So that would be Alameda County, Santa Clara County, including San Jose, San Mateo County, Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, San Benito County, about trying to probably at some point in the fall organizing a conference for ourselves where we would invite, our boards, and it would be an opportunity for all of our local elected officials to meet each other and spend time together and talk about these issues. And, if we can't do it for all the CCAs, certainly the 5 of us may also benefit from a book like that, and kind of, again, just more coordinated regional action, because so many of you are so used to working with your colleagues from the other counties. I think this is another area.
I would suggest Monterey is where we meet, but just thought. I'm sure Dan wants to go to the Claremont, but okay. So anybody else on this? All right, so we're going to move forward. Where'd you want to go now, Nick? What do you want to do now? You want to do item 8? Let's go to item 8 then. Yeah.
Good evening, JP Ross, Senior Director of Local Development, Electrification, Innovation. We're going to be talking about the new pilot that we'd like to launch. We want to get your feedback and approval for a pilot to test demand response with behind-the-meter battery storage on our customers. We don't have a presentation. We've got the agenda item that was posted, so I'll go through it. It's pretty simple. So many of you probably remember we have our peak day pricing demand response program that's available for large commercial customers. We want to expand our demand response offerings and open up the opportunity for our customers, residential and commercial, to participate in lowering our energy costs for customers. And so this summer, during high energy price periods, we are going to be sending price signals to participating battery operators so that the operators of battery systems, either an individual operator or an aggregator of battery systems, will be able to discharge those batteries at a higher rate than they normally would. So we'll compare the discharge rates of those batteries during an event period to how those batteries were operated in a similar day that was not an event, and then we'll be compensating those battery operators for the power they provide. The proposals, we would pay them $100 megawatt hour. And so we'll be notifying of events where we expect the energy price to be above $150 a megawatt hour. Over 2017 to 2018, there were about 272 hours where the price in the energy market was above $150. So we'll be taking that as an indicator, using that as a threshold point to send these pricing notifications. We don't expect that this program is going to have a high cost because we hope to be saving more money than we're spending. But this is really to test the responsiveness. How responsive are these participants? How quickly can we notify them? How quickly can they respond? How accurate are we? How accurately are we able to get those pricing signals out there? And it's a very time-responsive market. So most of the high-priced events, they don't last that long. So we need to get the notification out to these participants, have them increase the discharge rates from their batteries quickly. So ultimately what we'll want to do is kind of get our hand on the dial, so to speak, but in a pilot, we're not going to be able to automate that. So we'll be relying on manual notifications, text message and email with the participants. So there's a small number of participants in the market who are really operating batteries now. We're doing outreach to those participants, and this is a very quickly growing market. So according to the self-generation incentive program data that's available, there's a little over 3 megawatts of batteries that have received incentives from the state to install those batteries, but there's 3 to 4 times that are in process. So there's a lot more batteries that are going to be coming into the market. So we really want to start testing this now, understand how the operating cadence will go with these providers during high-priced hours, and then come fall, we will start to see some very low-priced hours in the market as solar is pumping in September, October, and March and April, and we also want to then be testing how we can create demand during low energy priced hours. So we're really trying to test out how to engage our customers in participating in these markets, and suffice it to say, if we can lower our energy costs, then it lowers costs for everybody. So we're pretty excited to launch this. We've gotten some good feedback from potential participants, and so happy, we want to get this out there with your approval.
Questions, Director Mendel?
So a question, the program is, the motion that you're asking for would cap the program at 10 participants. Sure you want to cap it so low? You want a little headroom there in case you get a new, customer that's putting in a battery and they want to get signed up, and maybe a little bit of headroom? Sure.
Happy to increase it. Where I have a hesitation is just on the organizational cost of responding to lots of participants. So I will want to cap it at, if I get a flood of applicants, then that might be pretty organizationally heavy. But happy to increase it to 20 or 30. But because it's not automated, it will be manually administered for the time being, and that'll be me.
Yeah, and I would just sort of envision whatever number you pick, just leave yourself a little bit of room below the cap in case there's some big players that come along that, hey, we'll sign up for EBC, but only if,
right.
If they can
yeah,
participate.
I had a higher number at the start. When I reviewed the data associated with companies that have applied for the self-generation incentive program, I think there's only four parties or 5 who had installed more than 50 kilowatt hours of batteries. Now, I know that there's other parties who have installed batteries that are not on that list, so I was feeling fairly confident that doubling the number that have received incentives was high enough. But point taken, I actually don't want to lock ourselves down by a board approved item that then restricts our ability to flex with interest. So happy to take that change.
Director Hernandez.
Thank you for this program. I just have a question in regards, I heard you say text messages. I saw that in your report. It was only email or phone calls. I think I just heard you say text message as a way to communicate with the parties, which is good. And you're saying 75 minutes prior to the event. Is that how much time you see that somebody can respond to the event request to discharge more power?
Yeah, so actually that is the solicitation. I was just writing it today in preparation for approval. I'm trying to bring that down to an hour. So I would change that to 60 minutes for the solicitation. That is the response time that I've gotten back from potential participants, that they need some time, because we give them the notification, or we can actually send the notification straight from the data, from the website that we're scraping data from, so we actually don't have to be in the middle of that. So we'll look to compress that timeline, but then somebody has to get into a battery management system and program that to then discharge a battery. So there is some transaction time that I'm building for, and I'm trying to make it available to participants who aren't totally automated and haven't, built into larger programs like the CAISO has offered, to make it more applicable for participants within our service territory. So I'm being a little more flexible with that. Over time, I would see evolving this such that we end up paying more the quicker someone can respond. And if somebody lets us put our fingers on the dial, then we actually know exactly how much we can get. But right now, the energy prices are really in the real-time market. So we have a ticker tape across the bottom of a screen, and it says energy prices are high, and we have to respond to that right now. And the majority of those high-priced events don't actually last that long. So that's why the speed of response is actually quite important and something we need to get into and test.
And I think I heard you said if you have more control over the dial, you'd give them a premium, because then you could respond and be able to pull in that demand. Do you see the future of this program being where you deploy batteries to potential aggregators of data and then have that public-private partnership, or something down the line where you, through the local development business plan, that you're able to procure those batteries, deploy them, go to market, and have more control over generating that electricity?
Yeah, so we'll be looking at how we can stack the value of batteries. So we might put in place a program to pay for capacity for RA value, and then also pay for energy value. This pilot is really to test the energy value segment of that, but how do we stack all those up so that we can deploy more batteries across our jurisdiction?
Well, thank you very much.
Anybody else? I do have one speaker on this item, Mr. Dwight Turner. Good evening.
Good evening. Dwight Turner, live in Hayward, 28700 Barn Rock Drive. My input was the use of residential batteries, which currently are already senses demand in homes and can mitigate peaks in spikes in people's usage. And it doesn't require any external management. It's all done in-house. And they're available right now and can be deployed right now. And what I'm suggesting is that we just provide an extra incentive program, because right now the cost of the batteries is kind of high. That's probably going to come down more and more with time. But if it could kind of jumpstart that, then you spread out the distribution right down to the houses, residential houses. Essentially, you come home in the evening, you got the oven going or whatever, you turn on the lights, you're using more energy, air conditioning comes on because of the heat wave, is already taken care of there, nobody has to do anything else. And just right now, it's just too expensive. So some type of incentive would be very helpful, and I don't know if anyone done the analysis to see if it would, the cost of doing it this way, but by giving an incentive, maybe a rebate or whatever, would offset the cost of trying to get someone else to do it externally and paying them X amount of dollars. And it would also be an incentive to our local economy, since we produce batteries here, or at least companies do in the state, and we have electricians in these areas, and it would be an incentive to everyone. And it'd be a very simple process, and that's all I'm suggesting. Thank you.
Nick, did you want to respond to that? Anything?
No, I think, the idea of working towards developing an incentive program and helping people adopt is definitely kind of down the line, something we're going to be really focusing on. So.
Okay.
Can I respond?
Go ahead.
So just one note, there is an incentive program for batteries. It's called the Self-Generation Incentive Program. There's tens of millions of dollars available in that program, administered, and collected from public purpose charges. So there's already a lot of money in that. This is provides a different resource to EBCE for managing our procurement costs.
Jessica?
I just wanted to go on the record on behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance that we support this program because it's a good win-win for the East Bay Community Energy Program, for those who have the batteries on their buildings, and ultimately because this will keep costs down and affordable for all ratepayers in our program. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. We would note that at our places, we have a note from the Sierra Club on this item. So with that, I don't think I have any other speakers unless anybody wants to come forward. There are no other questions, so I'm now looking for a motion, and I think, looks like Director Mandel, I think were you
So I'm happy to second it with the increase in the cap to 20.
That's fine.
Great.
Are you okay with that, Nick?
Yes. We had, I think quite a bit of internal discussion about the cap, and I think that we felt there was not a right number given that this is such a nascent industry, so we're comfortable with that.
And I'm not expecting you to fill it. I want to have the headroom. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any Director Hernandez? Is there any objection to the motion? All right, motion passed without objection. I noticed that Director Root has snuck in on us, so I don't know when he snuck in, but he is here. So we have one more vote. Thank you for coming. All right, with that, I'll move to item 10. You're busy tonight.
I am. I'm always busy. So for item 10, we are asking that the board approve a process by which we would do this year's annual review of rate setting. So just a quick reminder about our history. The board initially set our value proposition, so the 1.5% discount for Bright Choice, the parity with PG&E pricing for Brilliant 100 back in February of 2018. We then brought the third product forward, which is the Renewable 100, and that rate or cost was set in June of 2018. So we're now nearly a year in advance of that time. And just a reminder that our implementation plan, which was submitted to the PUC, says EBCE will review its rates at a minimum once a year. EBCE will employ a robust and highly transparent rate setting process for all rate changes that will include both a public hearing and a written public comment period. So what we would propose to do for this year, being that the standard rate setting process with PG&E is definitely out of whack, we would like to ask the board to approve this process. We would bring then the potential value proposition changes to the executive committee on May 24th. We would then hold up to 3 public workshops distribute those across the county, different times of day, perhaps on a weekend, so that we can get robust public comment. We would accept written public comment and then bring something back to the board in June for your approval. We are still doing that analysis in terms of what those options would be, so that's what we would bring to the executive committee. And then what we would aim to do is with that June approval, or maybe it's keep things as they are, but if there was any change which was approved, we would basically program that in at the same time we make any adjustments for what is expected to be a July 1 change to the PG&E rates. So basically any change to the value proposition or discount, we would want to code that in at the same time we're already making changes because of PG&E rate changes. And then we would come back to the board in July and just confirm and present those rate sheets.
There you have it. Thoughts? Director Hernandez?
Yes, this is my third comment for the day. I normally like to limit myself to 3 comments if I can. In regards to the rates, I know that's going to look to go to the executive committee, so we won't see it towards the end of the process if we do forward the recommended approval process. So if this seems like this is my only chance to really say anything about the 3 programs until it comes back later, because it'll go towards executive approval. I'd really like to see more incentives towards that Brilliant 100 and Renewable 100. I know some agencies, some cities have already defaulted to the higher tier, whereas my city did not. So I would want to see how can we incentivize more adoption toward those greener alternatives. And that would be my only sort of recommendation here that I would offer in anticipation of this process moving forward. So if we can find a way to really encourage that adoption, if we are looking at maybe additional discounts, possibly, see how that balances out with the budget, and encourages that adoption and spurs that reinvestment or the protection of the planet, which is one of the reasons we're here, but also providing those savings, I would encourage that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so this is an action item. I would be looking for a motion if anybody's.
So moved.
Have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Is there any objection to the motion? Hold on. Nobody, I have no speaker cards. Okay, any objection to the motion? Motion passed without objection. So we're now to board member announcements. Is there any? Director Pilch.
Yeah, I just want to say that JP came to Berkeley, organized the electrification and Reach Code event, which I really appreciated. It culminated in a public meeting on electrification by Councilmember Harrison of Berkeley, and there was a lot of interest in the community about the ideas of Reach Code and electrification, and was happy to see that happen. So thanks.
Thank you. Director Hernandez.
One more comment. I think we, through the grant process, I believe you haven't provided notification, as you sent the email that we received 27 different applications for the grant by EBCE to deploy about $40,000 per grantee, up to 4. So we've done the initial review, myself, and I think another member from CAC with JP, to do the initial baselining for the scoring. So we're looking at 27 different applications. I put my hat in there to be a scorer, and so I'm luckily able to see some of those applications. And then after that process, I believe it comes forth to the board for approval. Is that what occurs? No, it just goes towards what's recommended there. So yeah, there's 27 different applications, some of which might be asking for the full $40,000, some maybe not as much, but scoring them based on the primary objectives about jobs, also how innovative they are, maybe in regards to sustainability and education, some of the other factors. So we started that process. I think on Friday was the deadline, and we're reviewing those now. Thank you.
So I would think those should come to the board. If anything, it gives it another chance to kind of highlight the work that's being done. So I don't know why we wouldn't come to the board for approval.
Or perhaps as an informational item.
Yeah, I think we were certainly planning to bring them as informational item. I think when we approved the budget, the rationale is we approved the budget and the program, and so we were go forward. But it certainly can be brought forward to the board if that's something that
I think it should be.
That the board would like.
I actually think it should be brought to the board for approval because even though it's in the budget, I mean, there may be winners and losers, which is fine. I came from that generation where you didn't always get a trophy, so I'm okay with that. But I think that, I mean, there may be somebody that wants to talk about it. I just feel like anytime we're doing, I mean, just because something is a budget doesn't mean you don't approve it. And so I don't know, I feel that way. It's up to everybody else, but I just feel like we should approve this stuff.
I'm supportive of bringing forth the recommendations so they can see the applications, and hopefully that passes muster with this board.
For support.
Was it, sir?
For the board to vote on it.
Yeah, I think I'd be in favor. And there's a different view of it. Each one will be on average of about 30 minutes to review the application. There'll be 27 of them. And within the process, JP recommended. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, I think that, you know, appreciate the work you're doing on that. It sounds like it's going to be a lot, so.
Got to earn my stipend.
That's all right. That's an ad hoc committee. You don't get one for that. So enjoy. It's a freebie.
Thank you, sir.
Which will keep you in mind at the Christmas party.
Perfect.
All right. Anybody else, anything? Okay, so I just wanted to say that two things. First of all, I'm appointing Hernandez, Kolb, and Dutra-Vernacci to the ad hoc CAC Rules Committee, and how we're going to appoint people and reappoint those that are already on. So, Nick, you can go ahead and start working with those to find a date to get that done. So that is done. And also, I just want to announce that my reign of terror is about to end. So if you are interested in being the chair or vice chair of this august group, I turn it over to you as a profit-making machine, and don't mess it up, you know. So I would suggest you get an intent into, I'm going to say Stephanie on this one. It doesn't need to come to me, but get your, you know, whether or not, and I don't know if we're going to establish a criteria. I guess should I set up a nominating committee? Gal?
Do we need a lot of process for this? I mean, we could just do nominations from the floor as we did last year and let it play out.
You want to do that?
I'm okay with that.
All right, there you have it. So you can put it on the agenda. So I'm done in what, June?
June, yes.
So at the May meeting, we'll just
At the June,
oh, wait,
the June meeting.
This is May. I got to go home. So in the June meeting, we'll go ahead and put it on as a appointment of vice chair and chair.
Okay.
Just leave it at that. See how it goes. All right. So y'all can start making your phone calls. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to just share that we do have a board retreat scheduled for the first Wednesday in June. And I did want to ask a question. So we have quite a few renewable energy and energy storage contracts that we are very much looking forward to bring to the board for approval. And because we have a budget item on our regularly scheduled June meeting, I expect that might be, you know, a quite long meeting. Does the board want to use that first Wednesday, which can be used as a board voting meeting? It's regularly scheduled to review one or more contracts for long-term renewables projects. So these would be wind projects, solar projects, battery storage projects. These are projects that we've presented to the executive committee. We've been working with an ad hoc procurement committee. So there's been quite a bit of discussion. And in light of the fact that that retreat will also be focused on renewables procurement and the trends that are happening and the pathways for East Bay Community Energy to get to 100% renewables, you know, it's topical, but certainly it's also something that we can just wait until that third Wednesday meeting and take up all of those items then.
So, if I may, I'm eager to start approving those contracts. So if they're ready June 5th, I think you can bring some to us June 5th. And if some of them aren't ready, you can bring them June, what is it, 19th? That's fine too.
I'm okay with that. I would note the start time on the, we're starting at 6, right? Stephanie?
I believe we are starting at
Was there
6.
any reason we couldn't have started a little, or, I mean, it's a retreat, normally retreats are kind of out of the norms. Was there not a reason we couldn't start earlier? Especially now if you're going to add a bunch of contracts in there. That Al's excited to see.
Let us take that back. I think we just need to check with the venue.
Well, let me ask our members first. Rude, do you have normally you have a problem getting here, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I think Colby, you have a problem?
I could be in Dublin by 5:30.
Well, wait till you get that traffic. Take Bart. Yeah, okay, well, but we probably just, because some of the members probably can't make it till 6, we'll just leave it at 6 and go from there.
Yeah.
Okay? So is there any other discussion?
Nope.
This meeting is adjourned. Perfect. Just adjourned.